Dane Carter never planned to be a hero. In fact, he spent most of his life trying to be anything but. Life as a space trucker wasn't glamorous, but it was simple. Keep your head down, move the cargo, get paid. No one asked questions, and no one cared about the past. That was exactly how he liked it. But that night at the Rusted Star, a grimy dive bar on the outskirts of the Antares trade route, everything changed. He noticed her the moment she walked in, not because she was beautiful, though she was, in an unearthly sort of way, but because she didn't belong. The patrons were the usual kind, rough-edged smugglers, bounty hunters, and station workers too tired to care about anything but their next drink. But she was different. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, catching the neon lights in strange, iridescent patterns. Her violet eyes darted around the room, scanning each face like she was searching for someone, or hiding from them. Dane had seen enough desperate people in his time to recognize the look. Trouble was coming, and she was at the center of it. Before he could decide if he wanted to get involved, the trouble found her. The doors slammed open. Silence fell. 5 men strode in, their boots clanking against the metal floor. Pirates. Not the kind that plundered ships in deep space, but the kind that worked for the Syndicate, merciless hunters of anything valuable. And right now, their eyes were locked onto her. She stiffened. Dane saw the subtle shift in her posture, the way her fingers curled like she was ready to run or fight. But there was nowhere to go. The lead pirate grinned, flashing gold-plated teeth. "You've given us quite the chase, little bird." She didn't answer. Dane wasn't the type to play hero. He knew better than to get between the Syndicate and their prey. But something about the way she stood, proud, defiant, yet afraid, made him push back his chair before he even realized what he was doing. "She with you?" Dane asked, his voice calm. The pirate's grin widened. "She belongs to us." "That right?" Dane took a slow sip of his drink, then wiped his mouth. "Because from where I'm sitting, she doesn't look too happy about that." The pirate's smile faded. "Walk away, trucker. This ain't your fight." Dane glanced at the woman. Her eyes met his, and for a split second, he saw something that made his stomach twist. Not fear, trust. "Yeah, see, that's the thing," Dane said, standing up. "I got a rule about letting people get kidnapped in front of me. Doesn't sit right." The fight was over before it began. Dane took down the first 2 men fast, elbow to the throat, a hard kick to the knee. The third pulled a blaster, but Dane slammed his wrist against the bar, twisting the weapon free. The woman moved too, faster than he expected, her movements precise, almost too fluid for a human. But then the leader pulled out something worse than a blaster, a plasma blade. Dane barely had time to react before the searing pain tore through his shoulder. The heat, the smell of burning flesh, it was all a blur. He hit the ground hard, his vision darkening as the woman grabbed him, her voice distant. "Hold on." And then everything went black. When Dane came to, the first thing he noticed was the pain. A deep, throbbing ache that pulsed through his entire body. His vision swam as he tried to move, but something felt off. His right arm wasn't responding. No, it wasn't there at all. Panic flared in his chest, but before he could react, a soft voice cut through the haze. "You're awake." He turned his head slowly. The woman was beside him, her violet eyes watching him carefully. They weren't in the bar anymore. The stale, metallic scent of a medbay filled the air, and the hum of a ship's engine vibrated beneath them. Dane's mind struggled to catch up. The fight, the pirates, the blade, his arm. He gritted his teeth, looking down at the stump where his right arm used to be. It had been cauterized cleanly, the skin sealed with an unfamiliar kind of medical gel. His stomach turned. He'd lost plenty of things in his life. Jobs, money, people, but never a piece of himself. What the hell happened? His voice came out hoarse, dry. The woman hesitated. "You saved me." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, feeling real good about that right now." She looked away, guilt flashing across her face. Dane sighed, forcing himself to sit up despite the sharp pain in his shoulder. He wasn't the type to dwell on things he couldn't change. Right now, the only thing that mattered was figuring out where the hell he was. "This your ship?" he asked. She nodded. It was the closest place I could take you. Dane scanned the room. It wasn't large, but it was sleek, far too advanced for some random civilian. The control panels flickered with strange symbols he didn't recognize. The walls had an unnatural smoothness, like they were grown rather than built. He narrowed his eyes at her. You want to tell me who you really are? She hesitated again, but this time, there was no running from the truth. My name is Seris. She took a breath. And I'm not from this system. Dane snorted. No kidding. Seris shook her head. You don't understand. I am Zeltharian. Dane frowned. The name was familiar. Zelthar. An empire deep in the Andromeda sector, known for its isolation. He'd heard rumors, stories of their advanced technology, their powerful rulers, but he'd never met one in person. No one had. You're a long way from home, lady. I was trying to escape. Her voice softened. But they found me. Dane exhaled sharply. Yeah, I noticed. He ran his hand through his hair, his mind racing. So, what, you some kind of fugitive? She looked down. Not exactly. Something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine. Dane had spent years hauling cargo across the stars. He'd smuggled things he didn't ask questions about, worked for people he didn't trust. And he'd learned one thing the hard way. When someone avoided a straight answer, it was never good news. What aren't you telling me? He pressed. Seris hesitated, then finally met his gaze. I am the heir to the Zeltharian throne. Dane stared at her. Then he laughed. A short, humorless sound. You're kidding. I'm not. He rubbed his face with his remaining hand. Great. Just great. So I lost my damn arm for a runaway princess. Seris flinched, but before she could respond, the ship's warning alarm blared through the cabin. A deep, mechanical voice echoed over the speakers. Incoming vessels detected. Unidentified signature. Dane's stomach dropped. He knew what that meant. They found us. Seris paled. We have to go. Dane swung his legs off the medical bed, gritting his teeth against the pain. Yeah, no kidding. You got weapons on this thing? Seris rushed to the control panel, her fingers moving quickly over the strange symbols. The ship isn't built for combat. Of course it isn't, Dane muttered. The ship shuddered as something impacted the hull. Dane barely caught himself before hitting the floor. The alarm blared louder. Docking clamps engaged. Dane didn't need to see the enemy ship to know what was happening. They were boarding. Seris turned to him, fear flashing in her violet eyes. I can't let them take me. Dane clenched his jaw. He might have been a lot of things. A drifter, a smuggler, a guy who'd made plenty of bad decisions. But he wasn't about to let himself bleed out just to hand her over to the people hunting her. He flexed his remaining hand. Then we better make sure they don't. The ship trembled as the airlock hissed open. And then all hell broke loose. Blaster fire ripped through the corridor, filling the air with the acrid scent of scorched metal. Dane barely had time to duck behind a bulkhead as red-hot plasma bolts sizzled past his head. His heart pounded. He wasn't a soldier. Hell, he wasn't even a proper fighter. But survival? That, he knew. Seris moved like liquid shadow, pressing herself against the wall beside him. Her eyes flickered in the dim emergency lighting, scanning their attackers with eerie precision. How many? Dane asked, peering around the corner. At least 6. Seris's voice was steady, but there was an urgency behind it. Their syndicate. Yeah, figured as much. Dane cursed under his breath. He was down an arm, had no weapon, and the enemy was already inside the ship. Terrific. The lead syndicate enforcer, a hulking brute in black armor, stepped through the smoke-filled corridor. His voice was metallic through his helmet speakers. Hand over the girl. We might let you live. Dane exhaled sharply. Yeah, see, I'm not real big on might. He grabbed a loose maintenance panel from the floor and, with a grunt, hurled it straight at the enforcer's head. The man barely flinched, but it was enough of a distraction for Seris to move. Before the pirates could react, she surged forward. Dane barely followed her movements. One moment she was beside him, the next she was a blur of motion, twisting between enemies with an almost inhuman grace. She struck fast, disabling one man with a precise strike to the throat, another with a brutal twist of his arm. Dane lunged at the nearest attacker. He might have been missing a limb, but he still had a mean left hook. He drove his fist into the man's face, feeling bone crunch beneath his knuckles. Blaster fire erupted again. Seris darted behind a cargo crate, yanking Dane with her. His breathing was ragged, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Tell me you have an escape plan," he panted. Seris hesitated. "There is one option." Not liking the hesitation there, Princess. She pressed a hand against the control panel, and suddenly, the floor beneath them shifted. Dane's stomach lurched as the entire section of the ship detached. They were in an emergency pod. The explosive decompression yanked the remaining pirates backward, sending them tumbling into the void as the pod launched away from the ship. Dane barely managed to grab onto a safety bar before he slammed into the opposite wall. Seris, meanwhile, remained eerily composed, strapping herself into the pilot's seat as the pod's thrusters ignited. "We won't have long before they pursue," she said, adjusting the controls. "Hold on." Dane groaned, pulling himself upright. Yeah, I'm getting real tired of holding on." The pod shot through space, the wreckage of Seris's ship shrinking behind them. Dane exhaled, rubbing his aching shoulder where his arm used to be. "All right," he muttered. "Now what?" Seris glanced at him, a strange expression on her face. "You spilled blood in my defense," she said softly. Dane frowned. "Yeah? That usually happens when someone slices off your arm." She didn't laugh. "You don't understand." Her fingers tightened around the controls. "Among my people, that act completes an ancient ritual. Whether you meant to or not, you have bound yourself to me as my protector. For life." Dane stared at her, his stomach sinking. "Wait, what?" Seris's expression was unreadable. "The entire Empire will know, and they will come for you." Dane let his head fall back against the cold metal wall. Fantastic. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a fleet of ships was already closing in. Dane had been in bad situations before. Cargo deals gone wrong, pirates trying to space him for a bad shipment, a few too many brawls in dingy spaceports, but nothing came close to this. Losing an arm protecting a runaway alien princess, accidentally binding himself to her for life, and now, an entire empire was hunting him down? He let out a slow breath, rubbing his temples. "Let me get this straight. Because I stepped in to help you, I'm now magically tied to you? For life?" Seris hesitated, then nodded. "It is not magic. It is an ancient custom." Dane shot her a look. "It sure as hell feels like magic." Seris turned back to the controls, adjusting their trajectory. "We don't have time for this conversation right now. The Empire's sentinels will be coming. We need a place to hide." Dane gritted his teeth. "Yeah, well, hiding's gonna be tricky when we're in a floating tin can with no weapons, no food, and no idea where the hell we're going." She didn't argue. Instead, she pulled up a star map on the holo display. Dane watched as a set of coordinates flashed onto the screen. "Zeltharian Station," she said. "It's an independent trade hub. The Empire has little influence there." Dane frowned. "Yeah, I know it. Smuggler territory. But getting in without credits is gonna be a problem." Seris gave him a pointed look. "You're a smuggler, aren't you?" Dane sighed. "Former smuggler. But fine. I might know someone." She set the course, and the pod lurched forward, slipping into the star lanes. Dane exhaled, running a hand over the stump where his arm used to be. He tried not to think about it too much. Right now, he needed to focus on staying alive. Zeltharian Station wasn't the kind of place you visited for fun. It was a massive, rusted-out trade hub orbiting a dead moon, run by crime lords, black market dealers, and bounty hunters looking for their next payday. Dane had been here a handful of times before, mostly to drop off cargo he wasn't supposed to have. As their pod docked, the station's AI crackled to life. "Welcome to Zeltharian. Weapons must remain holstered. Unpaid docking fees will result in immediate termination." Dane let out a dry chuckle. "Real friendly place." Seris followed him out of the pod, her violet eyes scanning their surroundings. "Where is this contact of yours?" Dane led the way through the crowded market district, past vendors selling stolen tech, alien weapons, and food that probably wasn't safe to eat. They finally reached a dimly lit bar called the Drunken Pulse, where the air smelled of engine grease and cheap liquor. At the back, a tall, broad-shouldered man leaned against the counter, flipping a knife between his fingers. His cybernetic eye glowed faintly. When he spotted Dane, he let out a low whistle. Well, well? Thought you were dead, Carter. Dane smirked. Yeah, almost. Good to see you too, Rax. Rax was Aurelian, a reptilian humanoid with sharp teeth and a mean sense of humor. He crossed his arms. You're missing something. Dane rolled his eyes. Yeah, thanks for noticing. Look, I need a ship. Something fast. No questions asked. Rax raised a brow. And what exactly are you running from? Before Dane could answer, Seris stepped forward. The Zeltharian Empire. Rax's expression changed instantly. His amusement vanished, replaced by something colder. He glanced between them, then let out a low curse. You're in deep, he muttered. Real deep. Dane sighed. Yeah, no kidding. Rax shook his head. You're gonna need more than a fast ship, Carter. If the Empire wants you dead, there's nowhere in this sector you can hide. Seris hesitated. There might be a way. Dane frowned. This better not involve another ancient ritual. She ignored him. There's an old rebel faction that once fought against my father's rule. They were forced into hiding, but if we can find them, they might help us. Rax let out a sharp laugh. You want to hide from the Empire by running to the only people they hate more than you? That's bold. Dane rubbed his face. This is insane. Seris met his gaze, her expression unreadable. You can walk away, Dane. You don't have to be part of this. Dane stared at her. Walk away? After losing his arm? After throwing himself into a fight he never meant to start? He should walk away. He should find a quiet little backwater planet, get himself a new arm, and pretend none of this ever happened. But when he looked at Seris, saw the weight of responsibility in her eyes, the way she carried herself despite everything, he knew he wasn't going anywhere. He sighed. Yeah, well, guess I've already got a lifelong contract, huh? Seris blinked. You mean? I mean I'm in, Dane muttered. Might as well make this bad decision official. Rax chuckled. You're either the bravest man I know or the dumbest. Dane grinned. Probably both. Seris exhaled, nodding. Then we leave at first light. But outside, in the shadows of Jektari Station, unseen eyes were already watching them. The Empire wasn't far behind. And this was just the beginning. Dane barely got a few hours of sleep before everything went to hell. The first explosion rocked the station at dawn. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the corridors. Dane shot up from his makeshift bed in the cargo hold, reaching for a blaster, only to remember he didn't have one. Seris was already awake, her expression grim. They found us. No kidding. A second explosion shook the entire station. Outside, through the viewing window, Dane saw Zeltharian warships closing in, their sleek, obsidian hulls reflecting the station's dim lights. This wasn't just a scouting party. This was an extermination. Rax barged into the room, tossing Dane a blaster. Time to go, Carter. Dane caught it with his left hand, still weird, then turned to Seris. I hope you've got that rebel plan ready, Princess, 'cause we're out of options. Seris didn't hesitate. We have to reach Dock 12. There's a ship waiting. Dane didn't ask how she knew that. He just ran. The station was a war zone. Imperial soldiers stormed the halls, firing on anything that moved. Smugglers, bounty hunters, civilians. No one was safe. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic scent of burning circuits. Dane ducked behind a stack of crates, firing off a few shots. He wasn't a great shot with his left hand, but he made do. Rax covered their flank, taking down a squad of troopers with brutal efficiency. Keep moving. Seris led the way, weaving through the chaos with the kind of speed and grace that definitely wasn't human. Dane wasn't even surprised anymore. As they neared Dock 12, a new figure stepped into their path. Tall, cloaked in deep crimson. A black mask covered his face, but his glowing silver eyes locked onto Seris with deadly precision. Dane's stomach dropped. He didn't need an introduction. Imperial Warden, elite enforcer of the Zeltharian Empire. And very, very bad news. Seris tensed. Stay back. Dane, naturally, did not stay back. Yeah, that's not happening. The warden ignited a plasma blade, its golden glow casting sharp shadows. His voice was calm, almost bored. You have run far enough, princess. Seris stepped forward, her voice steady. I will never go back. The warden tilted his head. You misunderstand. His gaze shifted to Dane. It is not you I am here for. Dane barely had time to react before the warden moved. Lightning fast, inhumanly precise. 1 second he was standing still, the next, he was on top of Dane, blade swinging in a lethal arc. Dane barely dodged, throwing himself back as the plasma blade sliced clean through metal. He fired his blaster, but the warden deflected the shots like they were nothing. Seris leaped between them, engaging the warden in a flurry of strikes. Dane scrambled back, heart pounding. He had seen good fighters. He had never seen this. Seris was holding her own, but barely. Dane looked around frantically. There had to be something he could use. His eyes landed on a detached power cable, sparking with raw energy. That'll do. Just as the warden lunged for Seris, Dane grabbed the cable and shoved it against the bastard's back. The shock sent the warden flying. He crashed into a stack of cargo crates, sparks dancing over his armor. Seris didn't waste time. She grabbed Dane's wrist and ran. The docking bay was just ahead. Their ship, a sleek, modified stealth cruiser, was already powering up. The rebel pilot inside waved frantically. Get in. Dane didn't need to be told twice. Seris leaped into the cockpit, and Dane barely managed to pull himself inside before the ship took off. The warden, recovered now, sprinted after them. But they were already gone. The station vanished behind them as they blasted into deep space. They were safe. For now. Dane exhaled, dropping into the co-pilot seat. His entire body ached. Seris sat beside him, silent. Rax leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. Well, that was fun. Dane snorted. Speak for yourself. Silence settled over them. Finally, Seris spoke. You could have left. Dane glanced at her. You should have left, she said softly. But you didn't. Dane sighed, rubbing his temple. Yeah, well, guess I'm stuck with you. Seris hesitated. Then, for the first time, she smiled. Not just a polite royal smile. A real one. Dane felt something shift in his chest. He wasn't sure what was next. Whether they'd find the rebels, fight the Empire, or change the course of history. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't running alone. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't mind that at all.